May I have your badge number and the name of your supervisor?
Excuse me.
Your badge number. I'm entitled.
I need backup at pre-check lane 3. Non-compliant passenger, possibly hostile.
I'm not hostile.
You people always have questions. Always got something to say. Always making demands.
At 7:42 a.m., inside Charlotte Douglas International Airport, a white police officer approached a black woman standing in the TSA pre-check line and told her she was in the wrong place. The woman was wearing a tailored navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and holding credentials that identified her as a federal judge. Her name was Monique Johnson, 54 years old, appointed to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate with bipartisan support. She had served on the federal bench for 9 years. The officer who stopped her, Darren Kovacs, 41, had spent 16 years with the Charlotte Airport Police Department. He had decided in the span of a single glance that she didn't belong, not in that line, not in that terminal, not anywhere near the expedited boarding lanes reserved for verified travelers. He didn't check her credentials, he didn't scan her identification, he looked at her skin color and made his judgment. What happened in the next 11 minutes was captured by 7 different security cameras positioned throughout the terminal concourse. Every word, every shove, every moment of escalation that would later be played in a federal courtroom, broadcast across national news, and viewed more than 50 million times online. What happened in those 11 minutes would trigger an FBI investigation, end multiple careers, send 3 officers to federal prison, and result in one of the largest civil rights settlements in airport police history. Officer Darren Kovacs had been with the Charlotte Airport Police Department since he was 25 years old. In that time, he had accumulated 31 formal complaints from travelers. 28 of those complaints involved black passengers. He had been accused of racial profiling, excessive force, unlawful detention, and verbal abuse more times than most officers receive complaints in an entire career. Not once had he faced a disciplinary hearing. Not once had he been suspended. Not once had any supervisor sat him down and told him his behavior was unacceptable. Instead, he had been promoted twice. Among his colleagues, Kovacs had earned a nickname. They called him the Gatekeeper. It wasn't a compliment from those who understood what it meant. He had made a habit of stationing himself near pre-check and priority boarding lanes, targeting black travelers for additional screening and questioning. He seemed to take personal satisfaction in making them prove they belonged. A black airline pilot in full uniform had been forced to produce 6 forms of identification before Kovacs would let him pass. A congressional aide traveling with a U.S. senator had been detained for 2 hours based on what Kovacs called suspicious behavior. She had been reading a book while waiting in line. Every complaint filed against him landed on the desk of Lieutenant Frank Ingram, his direct supervisor, and every complaint was dismissed. Insufficient evidence, conflicting accounts, no video available. The excuses varied, but the outcome never did. Kovacs walked away clean every single time, learning with each complaint that there would never be consequences for the way he treated people who looked like Monique Johnson. Judge Monique Johnson had spent her entire adult life in service to the law. She graduated from Harvard Law School at the top of her class, turned down offers from corporate firms paying 6 figures, and joined the U.S. Attorney's Office because she believed in justice. For 22 years, she prosecuted federal cases, organized crime, public corruption, civil rights violations. She sent dirty cops to prison. She dismantled trafficking rings. She stood in front of juries and spoke for victims who had no other voice. When the president nominated her to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, the Senate confirmed her 94-6. Republicans praised her fairness. Democrats praised her record. Legal scholars called her one of the most qualified judicial appointments in a generation. From the bench, she had issued landmark rulings on voting rights, police accountability, and equal protection under the law. Her opinions were cited in law school classrooms across the country. That morning, she was traveling to Washington, D.C. for an emergency hearing at the Supreme Court. A case involving federal sentencing guidelines required her presence, and she had booked the earliest flight out of Charlotte to make the 10 a.m. session. In her briefcase, she carried her federal judicial identification, her State Department travel clearance, and documentation granting her diplomatic courtesies at all U.S. ports of entry. She had credentials that could get her into secure facilities most Americans didn't know existed. She had chosen to travel without her usual security detail. It was a simple domestic flight, a routine trip she had made dozens of times before. She never imagined she would need protection inside an American airport. Kovacs stepped directly into Judge Johnson's path as she approached the pre-check entrance. His stance was wide, his hand resting on his belt, his expression already hostile. "Ma'am, this line is for verified travelers only," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Regular screening is over there." Judge Johnson stopped. She had dealt with men like this before in courtrooms, in depositions, in federal facilities where defendants thought intimidation would work on her. It never did. She reached into her briefcase calmly and produced her credentials. "I'm a federal judge," she said, holding out her judicial identification and pre-check documentation. "These are my credentials." Kovacs barely glanced at them. He didn't take the ID. He didn't scan the barcode. He didn't examine the holographic seal or the photograph that clearly matched the woman standing before him. He looked at her face, then back at the credentials, and shook his head. "These are probably fake," he said. "You're going to need additional screening." Behind her, white travelers passed through the line without a second glance. A businessman in a rumpled suit. A woman with 2 children pulling roller bags. An elderly couple moving slowly toward the scanners. None of them were stopped. None of them were questioned. Kovacs' partner, Officer Neil Stanton, 29, stood a few feet away watching the interaction. He said nothing, did nothing. The security cameras recorded everything, including the fact that Kovacs never once scanned or verified her credentials before deciding she didn't belong. Kovacs pointed toward a roped-off area beside the security checkpoint. "Step out of line," he said. "Now." Judge Johnson complied. She stepped to the side without argument, without raising her voice, without giving him any reason to escalate. But before moving further, she asked a simple question. "May I have your badge number and the name of your supervisor?" Kovacs' expression darkened. He reached for his radio. "I need backup at pre-check lane 3. I've got a non-compliant passenger." Judge Johnson's voice remained steady. "I'm not being non-compliant. I'm asking for your identification, as is my right." Kovacs ignored her. He stepped closer, crowding her space, and pointed at the wall beside the screening area. "Hands on the wall. You're getting a pat-down." "On what grounds?" she asked. That was when he grabbed her. His hand closed around her upper arm with force that would leave bruises visible for weeks. He yanked her toward the wall and shoved her forward. Her briefcase slipped from her grip and hit the floor, clasps popping open, legal documents scattering across the tile. Travelers nearby gasped. Several pulled out phones and began recording. Kovacs leaned in close, his voice loud enough for the cameras to capture every word. "You people always think you're above the law." Judge Johnson turned her head slightly, her cheek pressed near the wall, her voice calm despite the grip on her arm. "Officer, I am the law. I'm a federal judge on the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals." Kovacs laughed. The sound was cruel, dismissive, dripping with contempt. "Sure you are," he said. "And I'm the Pope." Kovacs pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "You're being detained for disorderly conduct." Judge Johnson kept her hands visible, her posture compliant. "What specific conduct?" "I've followed every instruction. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't resisted." Kovacs didn't answer with words. He grabbed her right wrist and wrenched it behind her back with a violent twist. The motion was fast, brutal, and completely unnecessary. Judge Johnson cried out as her shoulder joint separated partially from its socket. The pain shot through her arm and into her chest. Before she could speak, Kovacs slammed her forward onto the metal screening table. Her face struck the surface hard, her glasses shattered on impact, a shard slicing into her cheek just below her left eye. Blood began running down her face immediately, bright red against the stainless steel surface, visible on every camera recording the scene. Kovacs forced her down and planted his knee into her upper back, pressing his full weight onto a 54-year-old woman with a dislocated shoulder and a bleeding face wound. "I'm not resisting," Judge Johnson said through clenched teeth. "You're injuring me. I need medical attention." Kovacs leaned down closer. "Should have thought about that before you got uppity." His partner, Officer Stanton, finally stepped forward. "Darren, maybe we should." Kovacs cut him off without looking back. "Shut up, Neil. I know how to handle these people." The cameras recorded everything. The blood on the table, the knee on her back, the words he chose. Every second of it documented and preserved. A man in a gray suit pushed through the gathering crowd. He was 62 years old, tall, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in positions of authority. His name was Colonel Samuel Okonjo, retired, former Judge Advocate General Attorney for the United States Army. He had prosecuted military crimes for 30 years. He knew excessive force when he saw it. "Officer, stop what you're doing immediately," Colonel Okonjo said, his voice cutting through the noise of the terminal. "That woman is injured and compliant. You have no legal basis for this level of force." Kovacs looked up, his knee still pressing into Judge Johnson's back. "Sir, step back, or you'll be arrested for interference with a police officer." Colonel Okonjo didn't move. Instead, he pulled out his phone already recording and dialed 911. His voice was calm, practiced, the voice of a man who had testified in hundreds of courtrooms. "I need to report an assault in progress at Charlotte Douglas International Airport, TSA pre-check area. The assault is being committed by an airport police officer against a restrained civilian. The victim is bleeding and requesting medical attention. Send emergency services immediately." Kovacs's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, a woman in a TSA supervisor uniform appeared. Denise Carrington had heard the commotion from across the checkpoint and pushed through the crowd. She took one look at the scene, the blood, the scattered documents, the federal judicial ID lying open on the floor, and her face went pale. "Officer," she said slowly, reaching for her radio, "do you know who this woman is?" Kovacs sneered. "I don't care if she's the Queen of England." Airport Police Chief Bernard Foley arrived 4 minutes later, slightly out of breath, his uniform still crisp, but his expression already tight with concern. He had received 3 calls in rapid succession, one from TSA, one from Airport Authority, and one from a city official who had seen a live video already circulating online. Denise Carrington intercepted him before he reached the scene. She leaned close and whispered a name. Chief Foley's face changed instantly. The color drained. His jaw went slack. He strode toward Kovacs with barely controlled urgency. "Remove the handcuffs," Foley said quietly. "Right now." Kovacs looked up, confused. "Chief, she was non-compliant. I have witnesses." "She. That's a federal appellate judge, you idiot." Foley's voice was low but sharp as a blade. "She sits on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. She was confirmed by the United States Senate. Remove the cuffs now." Kovacs' hands froze. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He unlocked the handcuffs and stepped back. Judge Johnson slowly pushed herself upright, cradling her injured arm against her chest. Blood still dripped from the cut beneath her eye. Chief Foley softened his tone, attempting damage control. "Your Honor, let's get you somewhere private. Medical attention, whatever you need. I'm sure we can handle this internally without—" Judge Johnson turned to face him. Her voice was steady despite the pain. "Chief, I've spent 22 years prosecuting cover-ups. I know exactly what you're attempting right now." She glanced at the cameras overhead, then back at Foley. "And you're doing it on camera." Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. They found Judge Johnson sitting on a metal bench, her right arm hanging at an unnatural angle, blood drying on her cheek and jaw. The cut beneath her eye required 6 stitches. Her shoulder was confirmed as partially dislocated and would need to be reset at the hospital. She refused to leave. "I'm not going anywhere until I speak with the FBI," she said. The paramedics exchanged glances but didn't argue. The Charlotte FBI field office received a call at 8:14 a.m. 2 special agents were dispatched immediately and arrived at the terminal within 20 minutes. While they were en route, Chief Foley made another attempt at containment. He approached Colonel Okonjo and the other witnesses